Let's have a brutally honest conversation about why so many digital marketing agencies fail their clients, why the industry is developing a bad reputation, and how you can avoid hiring an agency that ends up wasting your money without delivering any meaningful results. The reality is that agencies come in all shapes and sizes, from big name firms with lavish offices to smaller boutique shops, as well as freelancers or solopreneurs. Some do genuinely great work, but a large number fall back on superficial pitches, fancy credentials, or inflated claims of having a secret sauce that nobody else has. And then they churn through clients who eventually discover that the results don't match the hype. So I'd like to walk you through what I've seen go wrong for so many brands, how agencies tend to operate, and how you can sift through the noise and find a truly effective, dedicated partner. The first major issue is something I call the churn and burn model. Many agencies prioritize constant sales and new client acquisition efforts over focusing on the success of the clients they already have. Once you sign the contract and pay the first few invoices, you'll most likely be passed off to a less experienced team, or you discover that the big talk you heard during the pitch doesn't reflect the day-to-day execution. Meanwhile, the agency invests its resources in pitching more prospects. So if you're unhappy and decide to leave, it doesn't matter to them. They'll simply replace you with a new client. This dynamic causes a lot of frustration for businesses that go into an engagement believing that they're going to get strategic guidance and hands-on expertise, only to realize that they're being treated as an afterthought. Agencies that behave this way are giving the entire field a bad name because clients walk away saying, all marketing agencies are full of shit. When in truth, there are plenty that do excellent work but get overshadowed by the ones focusing on volume and constant turnover. So why do agencies get away with it? One big factor is overhead, especially for large agencies. They might have expensive real estate, robust pitch departments, big creative teams, executives who rarely touch your account, and a wave of staff dedicated to new business and new business proposals. All of that costs lots and lots of money. Agencies may put on a spectacular show when they are pitching you, glossy presentations, an armada of well-rehearsed staffers, claims of working with major brands. Yet the moment you become a paying client, you begin to realize you're funding all of that overhead. And if you're not a massive brand, you're most likely going to end up with their B or C team because the top talent has to be reserved for the top spending accounts. This is how you can see an agency charge high retainers while your day-to-day point of contact is a junior staffer who's barely run a campaign before. Over time, the disappointment sets in as you realize your marketing budget is partly subsidizing all of the failed pitches and plush offices, etc., rather than fueling real improvements to your campaigns. Another pattern is the frequent reliance on hype. Agencies often insist that they have a proprietary system or secret sauce, a magical blueprint guaranteeing to deliver big wins to everybody. The big ones of late are anything with the letters AI in it, right? We have a proprietary AI-based marketing analytics platform that tells us exactly how to identify your target markets and deliver great messaging and creative that's guaranteed to get you results. But if you probe further, they most likely are not going to disclose a step-by-step methodology or show you exactly how they plan to handle your ads, creative, or analytics. Instead, they wave the promise of, we do it differently than anybody else, implying a unique advantage that you as the client can't find anywhere else. But the reality is, in most cases, there isn't a hidden advantage, just standard marketing best practices that any decent professional can execute if they're thorough. Marketing success tends to stem from solid audience research, iterative testing, strong creative, and close monitoring of data, not from mystical processes or some magical black box that the agency claims to have. So whenever you hear an agency touting a secret approach, but refusing to elaborate or give you any real details, it's wise to be skeptical. If they can't clearly communicate how they tailor strategies for your brand, that's what we call a red flag. Now, let's talk about the difference between big agencies and smaller, more boutique-style shops. Large agencies can be appealing because they present themselves as extremely capable, referencing, big-name clients or sophisticated offerings. They'll show off a range of services from content creation to SEO, paid ads, influencer outreach, and maybe even in-house production. And that can sound compelling, especially if you hope to grow into multiple channels or want everything under one roof. But these larger firms also carry those large overhead costs that we discussed, which means higher fees. If your brand doesn't have a seven-figure marketing budget, you might remain a small fish in a big pond. And that typically leads to frustration when you realize you're not a priority. Your brand receives minimal attention, there's a lack of tailored strategy, and you're effectively funding a machine that focuses more on winning new accounts than on caring for the existing ones. On the other hand, smaller agencies often have lower overhead. They might be more scrappy, nimble, and often, open to investing in real time in your business. Even if your budget isn't massive, they don't carry an entire new business department that needs to recoup huge pitch costs. So they don't have to inflate retainers. That can mean that you get more value per dollar spent because your money is paying for actual work on your campaigns rather than covering overhead. And isn't that what we all want? You're more likely to develop a personal relationship with the agency's leadership, or with senior strategists. They most likely will say yes to a modest initial scope in the hope of growing with you if they do a good job. This sense of partnership can be invaluable because they see you as a potential long-term collaborator, not just as a short-term revenue injection. Yet, here's the catch. A one-person freelancer or influencer might have limited bandwidth or skill sets and can't handle everything you need. If your marketing requires a mix of paid ads, creative design, analytics, website updates, a single freelancer might be stretched too thin or absolutely not have that expertise. If they get sick or busy, your campaign is left unattended. So you might consider a smaller mid-size agency that has multiple team members but still avoids the heavy overhead that leads to churn. In that scenario, you can have a dedicated strategist, a couple of ad specialists, maybe some creative support, all at a reasonable retainer. Because they aren't paying for a fancy office and a giant pitch department, they can focus on what matters most, driving results for your business. We also need to address the industry's obsession with awards. Many agencies love to brandish their trophy shelves, telling you how they've won dozens of creative accolades or marketing prizes. That might impress you initially, but you have to remember that these awards often measure creativity or brand exposure, not necessarily ROI or lead generation. Sometimes they're curated by committees looking for eye-catching concepts rather than campaigns that genuinely propelled a brand's revenue. An agency might produce a visually stunning ad or campaign that gets them an award but doesn't boost conversions. If your core metric is profit, which isn't that everybody's, an agency's award-laden pitch might be more about vanity than actionable work you need. It doesn't mean that they can't do excellent work or, launch great campaigns, but if all they talk about is we won this gold medal without mentioning how it impacted the client's growth, well, that's pretty telling. So this leads to the next question. How can you specifically gauge whether an agency cares about long-term results or is just performing a slick act? One important tactic is to ask about their actual processes. If they truly know their stuff, they're going to detail how they research your audience, how they develop creative strategies, test variations, and optimize performance over time. They'll talk about real metrics like cost per acquisition or cost per lead and how they plan to reduce those figures. They'll mention the role of daily or weekly monitoring, pivoting if something isn't working, and the importance of synergy between creative and media buying. They're going to walk you through how they'll handle your brand's unique needs, whether you're B2B or e-commerce, a local service, or a more national product or brand. If they can't do that or they shy away from the specifics, they're likely trying to obscure that they don't have a special plan at all. It's also valuable to clarify who on their team is going to manage your account once you sign. Some agencies parade senior executives or top creatives in the pitch meeting, but as soon as the ink dries, they disappear, replaced by juniors who are learning on your dime. This can happen in mid-sized agencies too, not just the biggest. If you're comfortable with paying the big fees, you should definitely ask directly, will these senior folks remain involved or am I going to see new faces once we start? If they give you a vague response or refuse to commit, it might mean that you're only seeing a pitch team that will vanish the moment the real work begins. A second area to explore is cost structure and retainer minimums. Some shops claim we can't do anything for less than X amount each month, possibly because they have to cover overhead, right? It can be understandable if your campaigns truly require a certain level of ongoing work, but if you sense the retainer is artificially high just to maintain their overhead, you may be paying for more than what you need. That's where smaller or boutique agencies shine. They're often more open to starting smaller, focusing on, say, 1 or 2 channels first, then scaling if success comes, right? This approach also fosters mutual trust. You get to see if they deliver before committing to a larger retainer, and they get to prove themselves with a smaller scope. All this discussion leads us to reflect on the phenomenon that so many clients sign with an agency and leave disappointed. Agencies that keep a churn pipeline don't mind if you leave after 6 months. They've probably onboarded someone else by then or multiple people by then. That short-term model works for the agency's revenue, but it just destroys trust, for you, leaving a bitter taste in your mouth and reinforcing the idea that agencies are all fluff, and that's not what we want. That's not a universal truth, but it's common enough to tarnish the industry's image. Another big sign to watch for is whether the agency tries to tie you into a long-term contract. If they demand a full-year retainer from the start, consider whether you're comfortable with that, especially if they're not guaranteeing any kind of short-term deliverables or showing milestone-based progression. Marketing can indeed take time to yield results, that's for sure, but you should see some kind of movement in the right direction fairly easily. If you're locked in and discover that their approach is generic or underwhelming, you're stuck until the contract ends, which can be a painful realization. Now compare that to a smaller, more flexible agency that might offer a 3-month pilot or even a rolling monthly agreement that can be canceled, if you're unhappy. So if they truly believe in their capabilities, they often won't mind shorter, commitments because they trust that delivering results will keep you on board. That's not to say that long-term contracts are always a scam, but you have to assess how much reassurance or customization they're going to be providing before you sign up for the long haul. Let's also talk about vanity metrics. When an agency depends on metrics like impressions, clicks, reach, without digging into the cost per acquisition, cost per lead, or actual sales, that's pretty much a warning sign. If after a month or two they produce a 40-page report showing how many eyeballs saw your ads, but don't discuss conversions or deeper funnel actions, they might be deflecting from the real question: are we making more money or gaining more qualified leads than before? A strong agency conversation revolves around metrics that affect your bottom line, or at least lead you closer to it. And that leads us to the concept of deeper relationships. Agencies that see you as a partner are usually open to frequent communication, transparent reporting, ongoing strategy sessions. They'll adapt if they see the approach isn't working. They won't just say, trust the process, while your metrics remain flat. Instead, they're going to propose new creative angles, maybe shift to a different ad platform or adjust the funnel strategy. That willingness to pivot quickly is crucial and something that, large process-heavy agencies sometimes lack. They might have complex internal approval layers that slow everything down, or they might not want to invest more resources if your account doesn't exceed, a certain threshold of spend. Since we touched on awards earlier, let's expand a little bit. Agencies do love to highlight that they've won design or creative accolades. It can be legitimate if you care about high concept branding or creative edge, but if your main focus is lead generation or direct sales, and profit at the end of the day, an award that recognizes aesthetic brilliance doesn't necessarily mean you're going to see more revenue. If an agency invests heavily in entering or showcasing these awards, you could ask them for real examples where a campaign not only looked great, but also improved the client's bottom line. If they gloss over that or pivot to talking about intangible brand awareness, it's pretty possible that their skill set is more about show-stopping visuals than strong conversions. It's also worth considering how these big agencies handle multiple clients in the same vertical. If you're a small to mid-sized brand in a competitive industry, you might find the agency already has a larger, more established client in that same category. So you risk your account being overshadowed or even conflicting with that bigger client's interests. A smaller agency might avoid taking on direct competitors at that same time, or they're upfront about how they're going to separate teams to prevent conflicts of interest. It's an important question to ask, do you represent any direct competitors, and how do you handle confidentiality and prioritization? Now, another highly relevant question is how they handle your ad accounts. If an agency insists on running everything under a master account that they own, and you can't access, that can be a massive red flag. If you leave, you're going to lose historical data. Transparency-minded agencies set you up with your own accounts that you own or connect to accounts you already have, or at least ensure that you have full access. That data is valuable for analyzing performance trends. So you should be wary of any arrangement that prevents you from seeing the real metrics and accessing those individual ad platforms. So as we consider all of this, we should refocus on how to pick an agency that genuinely delivers rather than one that simply accumulates your fees. The best approach is, to vet agencies with direct questions about their past campaigns. Can they show examples where they've improved a client's cost per acquisition or cost per lead by a certain percentage over a set period of time? Can they detail the steps that they took to achieve that, or do they keep everything vague? If they brush off your request for details, it's not a good sign. Another tip is to see whether they propose a structured pilot project rather than insisting on a large annual retainer. If they say, we need a short period to test, measure, and then scale based on results, that's more realistic, and it means you can walk away if the pilot yields, little progress. It's also wise to learn who exactly will handle your day-to-day communications and which individuals will run or optimize your campaigns. See if you can do a brief meeting with them, not just this agency's senior sales or pitch staff. If you get to meet the actual specialists, you're going to get a better sense of their experience and their approach. And if the agency says you can't talk to them or tries to gatekeep that conversation, it might mean that those specialists are junior or they're juggling just too many accounts, neither of which really bodes well for your success. As you're negotiating terms, pay attention to any talk of locked minimum retainers, hidden fees, or upsells. If they immediately push you towards a bigger budget than you're comfortable with, ask them to justify why. Sometimes it's valid, maybe certain channels or strategies won't generate enough data on a micro budget. But if you sense it's more about covering overhead, think carefully. The ultimate question is, how comfortable are you with an agency that can't adapt to your current size or needs? A flexible approach usually signals a more client-centric philosophy. When it comes to timeline, marketing can take time to show stable results, especially if you're venturing into new channels. But you should see some forward momentum, like an improvement in your click-through rates or better lead quality, or at least a steady stream of relevant traffic within a few weeks or a couple of months. If after that period you see no signs of improvement, yet the agency just keeps telling you, we're still learning, you might suspect that they're stalling. Ideally, they'll have set up some kind of preliminary goals or milestones. If they can't meet them or at least explain the shortfalls, that's an issue. I'd also encourage you to trust your intuition. If in the pitch or early communications something feels off, maybe they dodge basic questions about performance measurement or keep hammering you with big creative ideas that have no ROI angle, listen to that. When an agency is truly oriented towards your results, you're going to feel a sense of mutual respect and clarity. You're going to see them ask you questions about your target audience, your past marketing efforts, your best-selling products, or your lead funnel, or even which products are more profitable than others, which will guide all of their, thoughts, directions, and strategy. They're going to be as interested in understanding your business as they are in touting their own accomplishments. That genuine curiosity about your brand often signals that they want to build a tailored approach rather than funnel everyone into a standard template that they're comfortable with. And this ties in with how smaller or relationship-driven agencies handle smaller clients. They often display genuine excitement about the chance to help you grow from a modest budget to something bigger over time. They don't burn bridges by delivering a cookie-cutter approach. They try to build real partnership, anticipating that if they do well, you might scale your budgets or refer them to others. That positivity and sense of collaboration can lead to an ongoing alliance spanning years rather than a short contract that you regret signing. So in the final analysis, you're looking for an agency that demonstrates transparency, expertise, adaptability, and genuine interest in your success. They should be able to show you coherent examples of how they've improved metrics for clients with situations similar to yours. They should be open about their cost structure, telling you how many hours they plan to devote each month or what tasks they'll handle, what their hourly rates are, or how they do billing, how many creative variations they'll produce, et cetera, et cetera. They should be comfortable with letting you see your campaign data, giving you real-time or at least frequent reporting that ties back to your business objectives. They should also be okay with you starting at a scale that makes sense for your budget rather than demanding a huge retainer or having a certain minimum monthly spend that they require. It's unfortunate that so many agencies do the opposite, focusing on fancy presentations, award-laden pitches, big overhead, and secret sauce claims, because it leads to a cycle of disappointed clients who might then refrain from investing in digital marketing ever again or working with other agencies, But if you do your homework, ask pointed questions, trust your gut feelings when something seems vague or hyped, and look for agencies that exhibit the fundamentals of strong marketing, you have a good chance of finding a dedicated partner. And that's the real key. A partner, not just a vendor. You want someone who invests in your future, who will pivot strategies when data shows something isn't working, who doesn't treat you like a stepping stone to a bigger account, or line item on a budget sheet. If you keep these considerations in mind, you're going to reduce the risk of hiring an agency that fails you. You'll be able to distinguish between the shops that are mostly smoke and mirrors and the ones that genuinely do the work of testing, optimizing, and strategizing with your best interests at heart. That's how you can avoid the churn and burn fiasco, steer clear of overhead-laden retainer fees that don't yield returns, and instead find a team that's in it for the long haul, eager to show real improvements to your marketing metrics and ultimately your revenue or leads. By being aware of these dynamics and proactively seeking agencies that demonstrate openness, expertise, and a willingness to grow with you, you're going to position yourself to get true value from your digital marketing investment instead of becoming another cautionary tale.